In this chapter, we're going to be taking a look at each of the control objects that are available to us when working with forms and reports. We've seen a couple of them in the last few movies, but I think it's important to explore each one individually and see what some of the options are available when working with them. In this movie, we're going to be taking a look at the selection arrow and the label control. We'll get started by going up to the Create tab and going into Form Design. Now, for the purpose of this chapter, I want to make one small change here before we get started. I'm going to go over here to the Format tab and scroll down here to the bottom. Now, by default, this grid X and grid Y value are both set to 24. That controls the density of the dot pattern that appears in the background. And I think it's going to be a little bit too hard to see what I'm doing with these dots here. So I'm going to change these numbers here from 24 to 6. That'll decrease the density of the dots and make it easier to see. Let's go ahead and save this form here. I'll press Control S, and we're just going to call it Controls. Now we'll go ahead and use this form throughout this chapter. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look up here on the Design tab of the Form Design Tools ribbon. What I want to focus on is this Controls group right here. These are all of the tools that we can add into our forms and our reports. Now, depending on the size of your monitor, your icons might be arranged differently from mine. On my screen, I've got one row of icons here, and then I can scroll down through the list to see a second row here. If I want to, I can use this drop-down arrow here that says More to see all the icons presented together. On your screen, you might see all the icons at one time. In this movie, I want to focus on the selection arrow, which is this first one here, and this label control, which is this one here. The selection arrow really isn't a control, it's a tool for working with other objects. The label control here is a static bit of text that is not linked to any data within the database. This includes titles, instructions to the user, and labels for other controls. They're all created with this label control. Now, this is a slightly confusing terminology because in other programs, such as Word or PowerPoint, when you want a static, free-floating bit of text, you're going to use something called a text box. In Access, a text box is something very specific. This is the text box control here, this one with the A, B in the box. In Access, a text box is connected to data. So as you scroll through the records in your data tables or your forms, it's going to change what appears. If you want freestanding text that doesn't change, then you're going to use this one here, that label control. Let's go ahead and click on it to select it, and then come down here into the detail section of our form. Notice that my cursor changes to a crosshair with an A character. Now when I click, a couple of things happen. First, you'll notice that I get this text box here with a flashing cursor, indicating that I can start typing in my text label. But you'll also notice that up here in the Controls group that it deselected the label control and selected the selection arrow so that I can work with the control. So let's just go ahead and type in the word text here, and I'll press Enter. When I do that, it finalizes the text entry and selects the object. So now I can go ahead and use the keys on my keyboard to move it around using the arrow keys, or I can hold down Shift to resize it. If I wanted to add multiple label controls, or in fact, multiples of any of the controls that we're about to see, what I can do is come up here, right-click on it, and choose this option here, Drop Multiple Controls. Now it'll lock on the label control. So I can come down here, click, add in some text, and notice that it didn't switch over to the selection arrow. It's still on the label control here. So I can go ahead and click on another one, type in some more text, press Enter, click another one, and add some more text and so on. When I'm done entering the text, I need to manually make sure that I switch over to the selection control so that I can start interacting with my objects. Now we've seen previously that the labels are all formatted through the options here in the Format tab over here in the Font section. So I can change the font, the size, the color, the background fill, and the alignment, and so on. I can also change these properties over here in the Property sheet. When I'm done with the text labels, I can go ahead and select all of them, and I'm just going to press Delete to get them off the screen. So that's the label control. It's one of the most common controls that you'll be working with when you create forms and reports. You'll use them anytime you want a static bit of text or instruction that isn't tied to a data source.